Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing in the Psalms today, and we are in Psalm 31. Again, we've talked on a number of occasions, this postscript is quite possibly being mislocated with the psalm after which it should be attached to. The psalm divisions are a byproduct of the Septuagint translation, and which was when the Jews translated the Old Testament into Greek. A lot of them were returned from the Babylonian captivity, and they did not know exactly how to divide up the psalms. And it's not obvious where the chief musician goes when you consider that there would have been none of this stuff. See that stuff? It was just the other stuff. So they divided it kind of arbitrarily. They figured, okay, the 2 goes at the beginning. And, but of course, if you compare Habakkuk chapter 3, which is like a psalm taken out of the Psalms, I mean, it's alone. This structure is not correct, but it is not very significant to understanding, so I mentioned it a few times. It's a good thing to know, I guess. I don't know. It might prove useful. I don't know where it's going to lead you into great misunderstanding to have this part of the beginning of the psalm, but anyways. A Psalm of David. In thee, O Lord, do I put my trust. Let me never be ashamed. Deliver me in thy righteousness. Bow down thine ear to me. Deliver me speedily. Be thou my strong rock for an house of defense to save me. For thou art my rock and my fortress. Therefore, for thy name's sake, lead me and guide me. Pull me out of the net that they have laid privily for me, for thou art my strength. I'll just read verse 5. Into thy hand I commit my spirit. Thou hast redeemed me, O Lord, God of truth. That seems like the conclusion of the first thing. I put my trust in you. I commend my spirit into your hands. That may sound familiar because those are the very words that Jesus spoke from the cross, I believe. Into thy hands I commend my spirit. Is that not from John? And he gave up the ghost? I believe so. Want to find out? Let's find out. I never just like to leave it like that. Here we go. Let's do a quick word search in my Bible collection software, which can be found in the bargain bin of Menards during the aughts, which is what the aughts are, right? I always wonder what we would call the period between 2000 and 2010. Apparently, those are the aughts, like double zeros, double aught. The 01, the 02, 03. Anyways, as I heard that, I'm like, okay, that's fine. But you'd have to be shopping at the Menards bargain bin in the early aughts to come across this software, as far as I know. I've never found it anywhere else. It's not that great or anything, but it's just funny, all the things that got made and stuff. The obscure, someone put a lot of effort into programming this. And so many other programs also for studying the Bible. And now they have web-based ones that are absolutely amazing. But I still just like the search function on this, so it works for me. What was I looking for? Oh, yeah. Commit my spirit. Is it commend or commit? I'm going to look at commit spirit. I think it's commend, actually. let's commit here in Psalm 31. Commend. Oh, it's Luke. It was Luke, not John. And when Jesus cried with a loud voice, he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And having said this, he gave up the ghost. He gave up the ghost. He didn't give up the body, he gave up the ghost. That's important. I always say it is. Jesus didn't give up the body, because that's what most people would say. He departed. But rather, the spirit departed him, which is not the way we would say it. That's not the way which we would in our modern, or not just modern, in our traditional understanding of death. We say that the dead are departed, not that life has departed the dead. That's not how we think of it. We think of they have gone, and we divide the man from his corporeal existence, his body. We think that's not him. But I don't think that's accurate. And though obviously, else there would be no purpose for resurrection. If the body is so not the man, why come back for it? In the teaching of the way the traditionalists teach it, you die, you go to heaven, and then you come back for your body in the resurrection. I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense myself, but hey, it is understandable considering that you can't deny the resurrection as a Christian, so you have to stick it in there somehow, even if you've already gone off to heaven without waiting for it. Anyways, that's not the subject here, Paul. Don't do that. I don't like to actually gratuitously just go off on a pet topic. I don't. But it's hard not to sometimes, isn't it? I always used to notice that about Arnold Murray, my original teacher, that he could be teaching almost anything, and he could find a way to turn it into a conversation about the rapture, and or the Keenites or whatever. There would be some sort of it would somehow how he would get there somehow. You know what I mean? And I definitely understand how that's done. But I remember it, but I also remember it as a cautionary thing. It's like, I don't want to do that. Or I don't want to do it gratuitously, meaning just to pleasure myself. Sometimes it makes a point. Sometimes it makes sense, but sometimes it is not. It's not the subject, and let's not get too deep into it. It's hard not to, though. Because like when you have subjects you care passionately about, and then you come across a verse that has some sort of correlation to it, or no matter how obscure, it's not really talking about the things I'm talking about, but it is obliquely referring to subjects which touch on those things. So it's easy to get over there, and to change the subject. And sometimes it's hard not to, because it's like you see an opening sometimes on a subject you care about, you just walk right in. It's like in a conversation, someone's talking about they're talking about corn or whatever, farming, and then something comes up that provides you an opportunity to talk about politics. People do that. It's like, hey, you mentioned regulations, and then boom, off to the races. And that's not entirely wrong, but I'm not saying there's anything particularly wrong with it. I'm just saying it can be a bit much. It can be a bit boorish when you gratuitously go off onto your favorite subject all the time. Like if you have a favorite subject. So, in thee, O Lord, do I put my trust. Let me never be ashamed. Deliver me in thy righteousness. We never want to be ashamed. And I think it means ashamed in the special, ultimate sense. We all might have, I don't know, maybe it means never, I always think a lot of things the psalmist asks for and says are somewhat hyperbolic. Let me never be ashamed is a hyperbole for, Never, do not let the great shame come upon me, or a great shame. I mean, I said a great or great shame, because there is an idea of like, all the mistakes you make in your life. Imagine them all being brought to bear upon you in a single moment, like of judgment. At the judgment of God. I mean, at the judgment of God, there's an expectation of judgment, right? Now, you're, like they talk about the white throne, the books are open and all the works are brought out and you're judged according to your works. That's the great white throne, And, to have all your shames brought together into one great shameful moment of accountability and being held accountable for the shameful things we have done. Now, what I'm saying is that you could look at that and say, "Wow, that's the kind of shame I don't want to have any part of. I don't want to stand before the throne of God ashamed." You know what I mean? With great shame. Or he might have also in mind that the shame that ends in your ignominious death. I'm sorry, I don't know a better word for it. Ignominious. A death that is spoken ill of. Like you die again, you think about like how, certain wicked leaders have come to bad ends. And even not so wicked men, but people come to bad ends, right? I mean, look at Jesus. If it wasn't for the resurrection, that's bad end. Crucified like a criminal. Practically naked up there. Being crucified naked in public is kind of embarrassing. You can bet it would be. It's the kind of thing that makes you ashamed. But Jesus took this upon himself willingly. Or at least, willing to obey God, not that he desired such suffering, but rather that he desired the joy and the victory that would come about because of the suffering. And because he laid his life down, that means that I won't ever have to face that great shame of standing before God and having him just go over everything to my face, telling me exactly what a piece of garbage I really am. And like in the judgment, in the true judgment. Now that's the ultimate judgment, the white throne judgment. But there are all kinds of other numerous little judgments we go through, or moments of judgment in our life. Moments where we are exposed, perhaps, where the shameful things we have done come to light, And of course, let me never be ashamed. We're all going to have moments of shame. But I'd prefer not to, right? I prefer never to be ashamed of even the least part of my life. I would like to be able to take everything in my life that's ever been done and joyfully exhibit it for public consumption, right? But the thing is, there are shameful things in my life, things that I've done in the past that I'm not afraid to talk about them because I confess my sins to the Lord. I've confessed them to men. But nevertheless, and that's part of, avoiding shame. And it's not in this psalm. It's actually the next one talks about confession. When you confess your own sins, you kind of disarm the shame that can come about from them, especially if you're doing it voluntarily. When you're being coerced or being forcibly exposed, the shame is going to be harder to bear because you're not willing, right? And you're whenever you have to do something and you're being dragged kicking and screaming, that is significantly harder to bear than something you've mentally prepared yourselves to accept, right? You're mentally prepared. I'm going to accept the shameful exposure of my deeds. Like I said, but thanks be to God for Jesus Christ, because he endured the shame of the cross for our sake. We never have to be ashamed before God. And we never even appear in that white throne judgment when we put our trust in him. We instead appear at the judgment seat of Christ, where we have an expectation that he's going to say, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." Now, we know from the Gospels that there are people who think they're going to appear at the judgment seat of Christ to hear that, who will instead find something very different, which is, can be kind of terrifying. But when you look at those scriptures, like you talk about the parable of the talents, the one who had the one talent and he hid it in the earth, or the man who came into the wedding not having on a wedding garment, Luke, Matthew 20. You look at those passages, right? In the New Testament, you say, like, that is scary, because here we're talking about people who are trying to please God. And dispensationalists would just throw that stuff out and say that doesn't apply. It always applies. It always applies to people who mock God. People who mock God and think they can play around. Think that it's some sort of game. They try to game the system, to treat God like he's some sort of system. Like in a lot, I forgot if it's The Simpsons or whatever, those cartoons. They have, I think my microphone's just a bit too loud. Those cartoons they have, the adult, well, they're not adult, but they're, PG-13, I'd say, or whatever. They have adult themes, or let's say more mature themes than you might expect for a children's show, but they're cartoons, right? Like Simpsons or Family Guy, right? And they have similar, like, irreverent male leads, whether it be the young Bart Simpson or Homer, right? I assume everyone's seen this. It's been around forever. It's not like I watch it all the time, but I know there's a famous line. I have watched it in the past. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen an episode of The Simpsons in a decade, though. So that shows you how much I watch it. But I always just remember this famous line. I forgot who said it. It's some character from one of those cartoons. Basically something along the lines of, like, their plan was to live a life of sin and then repent at the last second. Wait till they were on their deathbed and then turn to God and thereby sort of game the system like that. In fact, in my 10 years ago, I used to make reference to that kind of thinking and such. And I don't know anyone who ever thinks like that. I see it as a joke in pop culture, but does anyone really believe that? Is anyone living their life like that? That's an interesting question. I'm thinking, I will, use the system God has set up to my advantage so that I can sin without consequence all my life, and then at the last second I'll change my mind about it. Of course, you may not be given that last second to change your mind. God is not mocked. As I certainly don't think things like. But what I'm saying is, that is an extreme case of an attitude that can invade the minds of men. That's an extreme case, but there is a certain reliance on the thought that there is some sort of systematized thing which they cannot, which they can't screw up. And there is a truth in that. It's not because it's a system, though. It's because our Lord is merciful and kind, and also that He is zealous to save you. You know what I mean? So, in a sense, if God is the one working to save me, can I indeed screw it up? I would say no, not of myself. But that doesn't mean there are not lives and relationships with God that are not screwed up, that are not somehow corrupted. I don't know. It's a strange thing because we all love and believe in God, but we all have such differing opinions, and it's hard to wrap your mind around. I want to be gracious to my brothers, to other people who believe. I want to consider them brothers, even though we have different views. Well, because they put their trust in the Lord Jesus to the extent that we understand him to be the same man. And that is not always the case. I mean, that's what it's like. Where do we draw these lines? Where does God draw the line? You know what I mean? Because I could say to my brother, well, you don't really know Jesus. Because I say Jesus is like this. This is what Jesus is real like. You have faith in another Jesus, so I exclude you, and God will exclude you from his family because you have a different understanding of Jesus than I do. Some people could say that. So sometimes there's an inclination to feel like that. When the doctrine so departs from the reality that you think like, well, that's almost not even Christian anymore. And a lot of people feel that way about things like Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. Because they have a very different, the Jehovah's Witnesses have an altered Bible, and the Mormons have an additional Bible that most Christians don't think is genuine. That's just the way it is, right? So it's very different. But when God looks at me, how different is my understanding of God from the reality, from the way God understands himself? How much mercy is God exercising towards me? How much patience and willingness to play along is he giving? How much slack does God give me to not get it right? Because chances are I don't have God right either. Maybe I don't have him. Maybe I'm not as off as a Jehovah's Witness or whatever, not to pick on them, or maybe I've got it better than a Catholic or whatever, like I've got it better than the next guy, maybe. From my perspective, maybe I got it a lot better, but from God's perspective, maybe I'm mostly just as clueless as anybody else. It's like, yeah, you kind of got it. Put your trust in Jesus, Paul, but most of the other stuff is really highly questionable. I'm just saying that, I don't know. So, I want to be as gracious towards my brothers as I want God to be towards me. But there has to be a line. You can't just have, that's the thing that a lot of Christians struggle with, I think. Where do we draw the lines? I struggle with it, that's for sure. Okay, I don't know if a lot of people do. I certainly struggle, like, where are the hard lines? Because there ought to be hard lines. There are areas that may seem gray, but there are also areas that are hard and fast, cut and dry, black and white, right and wrong. And where in my walk am I, not aware of the deficiencies of my faith and my understanding? I don't know. I need God to reveal this stuff to me. Chances are, if he's going to reveal it to me, though, he's going to reveal it to me through men. Because I'm going to interact with another human being who also has the Spirit of God, and they're going to say something to me, and God's Spirit will move on me, and it will correct me. And sometimes the Lord corrects me himself. But sometimes it comes to other people, because I think it is good, because when you take correction from another man, it is humbling. When you take correction from the Spirit of God, it lifts you up, in a sense, because you think God is right with me, helping me, improving my understanding. I've had no end of times like that where I felt like the Lord and his Spirit are assisting me in my understanding. And I tell you what, it feels great. But even that, and if you're not careful in that, it can cause you to have an inflated sense of your own importance. Because you come up, like Paul talks about the abundance of the revelations. In the abundance of revelation, you begin to feel quite in touch with God. You think, wow, he's really showing me his goods. I don't want to get lifted up in that. Because sometimes he showed me his goods through other people. And that always humbled me. So it's good to take correction, to not always have to take it internally. It's good to be corrected internally. It helps avoid shame. You know what I mean? Like if I could just kneel and pray to God and all my problems would be solved in my closet of my private holy place, you know what I mean? Metaphorically speaking. You know, in my mind with my confession before God, if that could be the entire, solution to the shameful things of my life, well, that would suit me just fine. That's not necessarily what God wants from me. Sometimes God wants from me experiences that are tougher. And that's the reason why I talk about this never be ashamed is, let me never be ashamed. That may be what I want. But sometimes, and I certainly trust God to keep me from the big shame. The big shame of, being exposed sinfully in a way that is, I don't know, like, from the big shame before God. I don't want to be ashamed before God. Shame me before men, whatever. But even that I want to avoid, right? I want to avoid it. But sometimes we deserve to be ashamed because we do things that we shouldn't do, right? And if the Lord allows us to do that which we would not do or should not do, we may have some sort of shame associated with it. You can be exposed. If a brother be overtaken in a fault, restore such a one in the spirit of meekness, lest all be also tempted. Galatians chapter 5, I think the end of that chapter, or 6, the beginning. Whatever. One of those two. It's in Galatians. You can be caught up in a fault. They catch you. Nothing more embarrassed. I've never had anyone, back when I used to struggle with masturbation, because I used to have a major problem with it. What's a major problem with masturbation? Oh, masturbating 2-3 times a day. Wouldn't you say that's a pretty big problem? And that's embarrassing. It's shameful. I only can talk about it because I can say, yeah, the last time I had a problem with that was 2005. So, 15 years later, you can, you feel less embarrassed. Even though when I said it, I feel a little, I don't like to publicly admit that I ever had a problem with that. But so many men have such problems that it's not like, whatever. And women too, I suppose. I don't know. But people suffer from these problems, and they're shameful, and they're embarrassed. But I think when I started talking about some of my problems back in 2005, when the Lord delivered me from so many of them, it was because I'd been delivered. And now that I've been delivered, I felt not ashamed anymore because I felt like these things were truly in the past. And so the righteousness which God brings, deliver me in thy righteousness, is what ultimately prevents shame, because if we walk a righteous walk in obedience to God, we won't be ashamed, But if we do, disobey, we're not necessarily going to be, because of Christ and because of our faith, we're not necessarily going to be standing at the white throne of judgment and having the ultimate shame heaped upon us. The ultimate version of exposure and shame, standing before God naked and open before Him, and having your sins called out for what they are. And so I would never want to experience that. That's the last thing I want to experience. Come before the ultimate authority to give account of everything done in your body. Yeah, that's a party I don't want to attend. I'm going to go to the well done, thou good and faithful servant. Enter into the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. That's what I want. That's the judgment I want to appear at. Where your iniquities have been removed as far as the east from the west. Cast into the deepest part of the sea. Righteousness of God. Bow down thy ear to me. I want, come down and hear me. It's a metaphor for, attentive listening, obviously. It should be obvious, right? God can hear you all the time. But it's like I said, there's listening and then there's listening. sometimes I can hear the words that are being said, but I'm not really listening to the words. You ever have like a radio playing in the background that you're not listening to, but your ears hear that the radio's on, and maybe you catch a little bit of speech if they say something that is interesting to you. I just think that's interesting how you can have something playing in the background, not listen to it, but then something that sparks, some word comes up and you're like, hold on a second, I just heard something. And you caught on that there was some important thing being talked about that you wanted to hear. I was thinking it's interesting that you are sort of listening all the time until something catches your interest. But this is calling for that attentive sort of listening that we really desire for God to give, so that he would act. You know what I mean? It's like not just go like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. Hey, Dad. I think when the kids try to talk to you, right? Sometimes you're busy and the kids, my kids don't actually do this to me, but I see them do it to other people because they know better than to do that. Because I don't react well to things that I find annoying. I've always made sure the kids understand. Like, I don't know, in some way, I should say this is not exactly correct, because sometimes when I hear them doing that to other people, like making a lot of noise, like trying to get their attention, I always feel like I want to give it to them, but maybe it's not the best thing. I don't know, whatever. It's something I don't always pay attention to. Really listen, because I need help. And if you're really attentive to listening to what's going on, I know that deliverance is coming. Deliver me speedily. Be thou my strong rock for a house of defense to save me. And we talked about the idea of rock and house, mostly the rock, but a house of defense. I'm just curious what that looks like in Hebrew. I just don't want to, let's put that there. And then this. I'm just trying to get around the net. I just want to make a smooth transition. There we go. And it always flashes like that anyway, so I don't get it. House of defense. That's two words. One is house, bath. Or is it, well, like we have Bethlehem, Baith, a house. Defense, mastud, castle. Okay, fine. I don't think it's going to, don't think a, late Middle Ages Austrian palace. It's just whatever. Something, a military structure for defense. Maus, sewer. Yeah, so nothing really special there linguistically. I was curious if it was one word for house of defense. It's not like a house. I'm going to look up the word. I'm going to look at this word a little more closely. Defense. It said castle is the quick definition. I need a sip of water. Sorry about that. They're always invariably different, aren't they? Net or prey. Interesting. So how do we get there? Castle, defense, fortress, stronghold, be hunted, that's the way it's translated. So, or feminine, matsuda, or matsuda, whatever. For matsud, a net, or abstractly, capture. Also a fastness. Castle, defense. I guess it's through the idea of the way a net encloses the prey, right? The net encloses the prey, so also the castle encloses the king. I'll just say, the castle encloses the defenders of the castle. And I guess that's an interesting fact that the word for net and castle are the same thing, or fortress, whichever one you want to choose, in the Hebrew here, because, of course, as anyone who knows military tactics, fixed defenses are also traps. Yeah, I mean, it can become so. Yeah, I mean, a defensive position is great; it can save you, right? But it also can be your downfall in that you are now cornered. So a stronghold can be like that, like a net. So that the fact that the word is the same, wrong page. So interesting. So God is a house of defense. I see that red bar. Am I ruining this constantly? Okay. Let's see. That's a little better, I think. And people sometimes complain that it's not loud enough, but if I make it any louder, it just continually clips. It'll sound like this. That we don't want that. Sorry if that was loud. All right. Yeah. I should have warned you. Warning! Sorry. Now I'm going to be very unpopular for that one. Especially with earphone wearers, right? Sorry. Okay. Thou art my rock and my fort. Oh, so God, obviously, just the fact that linguistically it means a net doesn't mean that God, that being with God is a trap, or that a castle is a bad thing. It's just interesting to me that it is a stronghold. It is an enclosed place, as the net encloses the prey, so the castle encloses the king, and it is in the world of men not necessarily the best thing to just have a defense. Because every defense can be breached, except the Lord as your defense. The Lord as your defense is even, we talk about strong rocks, houses of fortresses and stuff, and God is like these things. But God is like so much more. He's so much more reliable. But we choose words of things that men rely upon for safety, and we think of as safe, strongholds. I mean, men trust in strongholds, even though military history does not bear out a great, it does not, strongholds have their use, but they are definitely limited. But God is not limited. The protection of God is like a stronghold, but so much better, so much stronger, so much more, because he's alive. He's alive and he's an individual being, and not merely a set of rules or a collection of walls and buttresses ramped up with earth to protect you from the pointy sticks and swords of the enemy. But he is rather God of the universe, and therefore, who can stand against him? Who can resist him? If he defends you, no one can touch you. As I'm with Job, nobody could touch him. And he said, Lord, you've put around, the devil's in him, you've put a fence around him, take it down. And he would curse you. Right? And, when you get dependent on the Lord's protection, and it's suddenly taken away, you might think, well, why, Lord? But Job knew he hadn't done anything wrong, but also he would not say anything evil of God because he knew God didn't owe him anything. God gave him everything. And if God wants to take everything back and away, that's, that, a grown-up understands. It's childish to be angry with God for him taking back all the things he gave to you. Right? And I don't want him to take away all the things he gave me. I'm rather attached to it. But then I think about it. Ultimately, we all have to give up everything God's given us. Because I'm going to die someday. And all that I've built, and all that I've loved, and all that I've hated, and all that I've been passionate for and against, all those things are going to depart from me. And I will never be worried about them again. At least those earthly things, like my house, my car, my family. And certainly after I'm dead, there's nothing more I can do for them. I hope to see them again, but there's nothing I can do. Now while I'm here, there's lots I can do, and I try to do my utmost. But sometimes that's not good enough. Even so. For thou art my rock and my fortress. Therefore, for thy name's sake, lead me and guide me. You know, there's this thing that, we can be ashamed. But our shame can also bring shame upon the name of God. We can bring disrepute to God through our actions, unfortunately. But it's impossible to avoid this. By reason of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken of. Many shall follow their pernicious ways. 2 Peter 2. Right? There are all kinds of people running around in this world, carrying with them the name of Christ, bringing ill repute to his name. And there's nothing you can do about it other than to try to speak the truth yourself. But even so, sometimes it's frustrating because I certainly think, I'm just adding to the cacophony. I'm just adding to the noise. What am I adding to the conversation? Another voice saying contrary things. That really helps clarify everything. Thanks, Paul. You're really doing a good job making everyone understand about God better. So you think. But instead, you're just confusing people. And that can it be avoided? In some ways, no. But it is part of, it's not, don't lament. Do not lament the situation. Because God's plan is proceeding according to plan. There's nothing unusual is going on. Nothing's happening that's like, oh no, the devil's winning or some nonsense. No, not at all. But, nevertheless, in the midst of God's plan, right, it says it is impossible but that offenses should come, right? But woe to them by whom they come. You don't want to be the ones by whom the offenses come. I don't want to be the one by whom the name of God is evil spoken of. So how can I avoid that? On some level, I may not be able to avoid it because they speak evil of God no matter what. Because sometimes even the truth is hateful to them. You know what I mean? A lot of times as a Christian you think I remember as a young man thinking this, if I could just get people to understand. If I could just get them to listen to me. I could explain everything, and then they see how true it was. They'd see the wisdom of it. They'd see, this is the way of a truth. God is in you. Because now that I've heard it from you, this vanity of thought. They're like, I can persuade people where others have failed. I don't know. I mean, I certainly, I'm never shy, even as I say that, as I talk about how vain it is, I still believe somewhere deep down that I can do it. I can persuade people better. Just listen to me. I'll straighten out the Bible for you. You won't think it's a stupid book anymore. You'll think it's great. Because I can explain things so much better, blah, 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 blah. I think that I can do a better job. Probably. I know some people are better equipped and better, have better certain kind of knowledge. You know what I mean? Especially when it comes to technical aspects of the scriptures, better knowledge of the Hebrew, the Greek, the translation, the overall, probably certainly more familiar with the text. There are plenty of people much more familiar with the text than I am. I don't think the ultimate familiarity with everything is required, though, honestly. You just need to have a general familiarity and the Spirit of God, and the Lord will work. And, and as we live, we increase that familiarity with the scriptures by meditating upon them and studying them as we do. I mean, every time I go through the scriptures, it increases, everything just becomes brighter and brighter. I have, where's my Bible? It's right around here. But you have your printed Bible, and I could just flip through one here and you see the printed pages. But you also have a mental Bible, meaning this is where the scriptures live in your mind. The most important place. That's why I wrote scripture songs, because it was to help the scriptures get into my mind. Especially big sections. I like the idea of getting big chunks. I always enjoyed puzzles as a child. And I enjoy them as an adult, though I haven't made a puzzle in probably, well, not including tiny children's puzzles, in a long time. More than a decade. Even children's puzzles, I hardly ever touch those. Right, but I like them. Why are you talking about puzzles? Well, I like them. I like to fill in blanks, I like to make the whole picture come together. I think a lot of people do, you get that good feeling of seeing something completed. All the kids want to put the last piece of the puzzle in. Right there. They want to put that last piece in. It can become a contentious thing that comes down to one piece, and then there's two kids, and they both want to put the last piece in. Or you're just with one kid, and you put the last piece in without, thinking. And I confess, it was a time once I took the last piece out again. I don't think I should have done that. They should learn to accept things that happen. Life is not always going to reverse for you. Put it in reverse. Come on, we'll go back. We'll fix it. We'll go back. We'll take the puzzle apart again, kid. There you go. Now you can do it. We really coddle our children too much. I mean, not that you got to be hard as nails on them, but, I don't know. Some things are just like silly, right? Like the last piece in the puzzle. But I like that. In my mind, the Bible is like that in my mind. There's like this big puzzle. I have a picture of what it's supposed to look like. Meaning my normal Bible. Where'd it go? Where is my Bible? Strange, it's usually right here. And it was right here not long ago. I didn't even see it around. Maybe it sprouted legs and walked away. That's what my grandmother used to always say. So, I like the idea of the Bible in my head being finished. Imagine having like a complete, like the same way it's printed, it is printed in your mind. Some people have memories like that. That's amazing. I have to do this the hard way. But, I also think that those kind of, people have those kind of gifts. Often it has like a downside to it. Something about the way your brain works. Because it's hard for me to think that if my brain worked like that I could still enjoy the functions I also have that derive from not being aware of everything. There's a lot of, it's fun. Like when I do Bible studies, I never know what I'm going to say. Even from moment to moment. I don't know what I'm going to be saying in 10 seconds. I have no idea. You know what I mean? 10 seconds from now, I don't really know what I'm going to be saying. Because it's unplanned and all that. And I like doing it like that. Some people might find it tedious. Maybe it is tedious. I don't know. But it's an important, internalizing the scripture is good. It's not totally necessary to remember everything. I always tell people this. As nice as it is, and as much as I promote that for a good thing, it's not likely to happen to any of us as far as like a complete crystal clear Bible in your mind in your lifetime. I don't know what amount of studying you'd have to do, but I certainly don't have I don't know if I have the capacity. Like, because the way I learn, I'd have to just lay it down again and again, year after year. I don't know what it's going to look like 40 years from now. Like, if I continued doing these studies, well, 40 years from now, I'd be, I'd only be 97 that year. So 87. That's nothing, right? As long as nothing's killed me prior to that. For thy name's sake. Because, it's useful sometimes. I'll tell you what. I've prayed it, and the prophets and David and others have prayed it. Sometimes when I think of something really bad coming, I do pray to the Lord and say, Lord, You know, I guess if I'm, if I'm at all important to you, if I'm any kind of servant that you care about, don't let this come upon me that my enemies should rejoice over me and say, where is his God? Like if the things I speak are true, if the God I describe is not, as I was talking about before, just a distant and shadowy representation of the actual thing, and maybe actually not even a correct shadowy representation. I've all got the shadowy part right. Right? And this also makes me think of like the concept I've talked about God descending on the mountain in Sinai, and he did so in a cloud of smoke and fire, and he said, "I will dwell in the thick darkness." And the people were afraid to approach God because God is shrouded in darkness. Now, in him is no darkness, no shadow of turning, but man is in darkness, and you have to pierce the darkness to see God. And not only that, God has to let you get through the darkness, honestly. When the mountain of fire was burning and God was speaking to Moses, anything that touched the mountain died. You know what I mean? You don't just get to walk up to God and say, "Hey, God, how's it hanging?" He's God. You don't get to just, it's like the fact that I pray and even think he ought to listen is pretty bold. I don't know if I think ought to, but like he would deign to listen. Why should God be concerned with me? What is man that thou art mindful of him? What is it? Why pay attention to me? Why listen to us? And the answer is but for his great love and mercy towards us. That's why. Pull me out of the net that they have laid privily for me. Guide me so I'm not ashamed. You're the protection. There are secret traps waiting for me. They've privately, secretly laid a net for me. Interesting. Remember the word. I wonder if that word net there is the same as the word fortress above. Probably not, is my guess. You say, well, why? It's because just because the words are related, meaning net and fortress, doesn't mean they're going to use the same. But let's find out. No, it's a different word. Resheth is, and you can't see it, but I'll show it to you. I wish that little pop-up window thing worked on on this OBS studio, because I could just show you the quick definition, and it would say, it says 7568, Resheth, a net, and and the other word for net, which was castle, was matsud. Here's matsud, and here's a net, and not deriving from any other not deriving from anything like that other word. They're totally distinct words. Now, this one's based on the idea of taking possession, something that catches, whereas the other word was something that encloses. It's interesting that both are words for net. Something that encloses, something that catches. It's two different concepts. The other one can mean also a castle, whereas the other one does not mean a castle, because it's about catching. Okay, further on my right, so those are not related, like I said. And that's what you gotta be careful of. You can make an assumption that they're the same when they're not. Okay. Yeah, enemies are going to try to lay traps for you that you can't see. But God sees them. And he has the ability to take them out of the way, so let's ask God to do that. Take the stumbling blocks out of the way of my people. Take ye up, prepare the way. Take up the stumbling block out of the way of my people. There are stumbling blocks and snares in the way. The road you're upon. To the right and the left. When you stop off the path that Christ has laid for you. I mean, it's an easy way to deliver yourself from the snares of the enemy. Perfectly walk perfectly the walk that Christ has given you to walk, or like him. Now, obviously, we oft go astray. Men go astray. All we like sheep have gone astray. And we still stray because we have not not been fully, like I said, it's fine. I rejoice in all the things that God has given me, all the blessings, the righteousness imputed and also learned, given. I have some righteousness that is literally just given me, like from my birth. It's just in me. And it doesn't feel like earned or something to brag about. And I don't have it in me to do certain things. There's no urge. Just because a lot of sins are based on we have urges, passions, and lusts that draw us off into temptation, and we do the things we ought not. All kinds of temptations to sin. Yeah, those are a certain kind of snare. Right? Because what else do they snare you with? One of the things that Balaam taught Balak to do was to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel by encouraging them to sin against God. He said, I can't curse them, but let me tell you what you can do. Send some of your slutty women in among them to lay with the men and to encourage them to worship other gods. Because sex religions were always real popular. Come and lie with me and you will know God. That's the reason that, it's amazing we have a world in which Christianity is the dominant religion, a religion that preaches piety and purity and wholesomeness. It gives me a lot of optimism for man that we would adopt such a thing. That so many of us would believe in it. To any degree. I don't care what degree, to any degree. It should give us all a cause for hope. Because men have heard the call and many have responded. Though I know not, are there many to be saved? I always said no, like Jesus said, straight is the gate and narrow is the way. Of course, overall, there's a massive multitude that are going to enter into God's kingdom, right? It's not a small number. But relative to everyone who has ever lived, it's apparently going to be. At least that's how I understand it. I'd love to be a universal reconciliationist. People who believe that all human beings will be reconciled to God. I would like to think that way, but I just can't. I just don't. There's too much, you have to kind of, all judgment has to be looked at differently in that case. And maybe that's the right way to look. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't have, I definitely, it's an interesting thing where, erring on the side of mercy and erring on the side of cruelty. Erring on the side of harshness. That's what the eternal torment is, an error into harshness, in my opinion. Right? My opinion. And then universal reconciliation is an error of mercy, meaning giving out mercy that God has not given. And reading mercy into judgment that is not written. But I definitely, I have human feelings, and of course, I have utter sympathy with that point of view. I do. I have sympathy with it. And I would believe it if I thought at all I could support it with intellectual honesty from the scriptures, And so maybe someday I'll learn to. I don't know, but I certainly don't now. I say those caveats because I am a man and I have flexibility. I'm not God. God is a rock, immovable. He changes not. I change. I need to change. I will allow myself to change. I don't need to embed myself in here. You see, I'm doing this study. It's like, sometimes there's some people watching, a few more here, there, whatever, and I love that. I love that you're all watching. But my responsibility is to the truth, not to building up a ministry in which, I can continually make myself look good by having a consistent set of doctrines which, I can defend. I do believe I have a consistent, as I said that, I'm like, boy, Paul, you don't want to have a consistent set of doctrines that are defensible. What, you don't want that? Don't you want something defensible? I do. I guess what I'm trying to say is that, like, if I say things and then I change my mind, my concern is not retaining disciples. You know what I mean? My concern is the development of myself and of the people who listen. And part of that, I think, is the best thing I can do to help is to, in my explorations of the scriptures, be as honest as possible about my own, not just honest, but be open also about my own deficits of understanding and knowledge. And also just realizing, it's important for us to realize, not necessarily realize, but important for us to acknowledge the possibility of being wrong. For me, it is. I will acknowledge the possibility. I don't think I'm wrong on anything, right? Because if you thought you were wrong on something, you wouldn't think that. You'd be like, okay, I got to throw that idea out. I think I'm wrong. Maybe you don't have anything to replace it with right away, right? I don't have an idea to replace that idea, but that one's wrong, so I'll drop it. A lot of pastors don't have that luxury. You can't just toss out denominational dogma. You know what I mean? Whereas I have, but the point is, I don't think anything I believe is wrong. But I have to acknowledge that it could be wrong. It could be. And that is not a light thing. It's not a light thing that I could be wrong. A student of mine gave me, they challenged me about the way I used to teach about heresy. But, it's mostly, like I said, I don't disagree with the substance of what I said, but the way I said it was probably not the best at the time. I was less considerate of listeners, actually. A lot of things I said in my old recorded studies, I didn't even think about people listening. You know what I mean? That's probably what makes them so enjoyable. You know what I mean? Because it's like, this is not like, you know what I mean? Like when they're talking to you and you feel like that down, like, hey guys, and I don't know. I'm not a fan of that kind of thing. We need to acknowledge the possibility. And it's important. It's relative to this because that's how you end up stepping in snares when you think you can't be wrong. You think everywhere you step is right. And because it's being laid secretly, you can't see it. You don't know where all the snares are. You don't know where all the traps are. I don't know what trap is laying around the corner for me. I depend entirely upon the Lord to show me that. Same thing with my understanding of the scriptures. I don't understand the scriptures the way I ought to. I need God to reveal it to me. Or to send people to me that, I'm sure there are people that would love to straighten me out. That's not exactly what I'm talking about. Keep it on a single issue or two. I mean, I can only handle so much at a time. Into thy hand I commit my spirit, thou hast redeemed me, O Lord God of truth. That's where we left off. Right? And I talked about that. I commit my spirit. I commit my life to you. I could fall into a trap at any moment. There's secret traps all over the place. I've got to walk. So I'm going to walk trusting you, Lord. You have to reveal these traps to me or guide my foot that I step not in them. Because I have no hope of avoiding them on my own. I don't have the knowledge to walk on my own without falling into traps. And so I need God to be active in my life, to act as a fortress, to act as a rock, to act as he's promised to be the comforter, which is, comfort is such a specific thing. But the word I believe in the Greek was paraklesis, means to call to the side. It's not just comforter, it's like counselor, it's like companion. Advisor, close advisor. It's like someone who calls, come here, and like, come to my side. Let it come, and I think about the way I will confer with my wife. It's like, come here, I want you to listen to something. I want to tell you something. I want to hear what you think. I do that all the time. I go to my wife and I say, what do you think? Listen to this. Because I like to survey thoughts that are not my own. Because it's like, you just listen to your own thoughts all the time. That's not good. Not for me, not for anybody. The thing is, sometimes you get stuck in people get stuck in loops listening only to their own thoughts. And it does not serve them well. There's so much more I'd like to say today, but an hour's up. I should save it for tomorrow, right? Maybe get a good night's sleep again, and then come back tomorrow to continue the study. Psalm 31. We will continue with verse 6. On tomorrow, thank you for joining me in this study. I look forward to being back again Tuesday. Until then, I think it's funny to say until then, and I have no idea what. Until then, walk in the Lord.